Alright, what's up guys, Azura here, and today we are finally here for our usual monthly tier list. This month we had introduction of Night Rose, Hari, and some extra support for Tavas, as well as a new Aquaforce deck. New, being used very lightly because it's basically still the same deck in Blue Wave, so we will see how they are added to the meta. We've also had the CS this month for Winter, I think, the season. Tournament result definitely does play into a result to my opinions of this month's tier list. So without further ado, let's get on with it. So first things off the list, I actually don't think any of these decks deserve to be off the list. I think all these decks are at least B tier. This tier is just here in case I need to put something off the list, but there's nothing for me to put off this time. I think everything's at least B tier or higher, so there's that. So you know, it's a reintroduction of Silverthorns. This was mainly because it was in CS. I think 2 people in top 16 played it. There was also they also got obviously support from the new set, so I do think it's worth at least mentioning them. So we'll just start from the bottom up. We'll save all the new stuff for later as per usual. So this and this, I didn't put Blue Wave on here because I do think Blue Wave is too similar to Thavas, or very very similar. So I didn't really see a point in putting them on the list this list. Wherever I put. I think it's just like a slightly different build. You play like 4-ish different cards, and you have a different heart instead, and you have like a different option for an extra stride with the Tetra Boil. So they're not on here, but give or take, they're the same deck as Thavas. Where I put Thavas, Blue Wave basically goes with Thavas. So yeah. So first off, Silverthorns. I think this deck probably belongs. I'm not the biggest. I don't like this deck. I don't think I hate playing against it. But I will say this deck probably does belong somewhere, probably high end of B. I'll put in the lower end of A. So here, the deck does the same thing as it did before. I think Lunatic is a very good strat for this deck, the GR that isn't the Hari, because it makes everything when something called flow, it gives a plus 2k, meaning all your 9ks become solo attackers. So I think is pretty cool. Gives you an action option for crit, and as well as better scaling. So that's pretty cool. So overall, the deck still does what it did, like however many sets ago since it came out. Still a pretty solid deck. I probably was underrating it before by not putting it on the list, so probably goes somewhere here. The new support definitely does help it quite a bit as well, so yeah. Next up we have Gabrielle. I think this deck probably... I think it's way worse than Celestials, but it probably goes... I'll put it on the tail end of A tier as well. I think it's... I probably was underrating last month too, but... I do think not having access to to the Mikhail as a first try is really bad, and I think overall Gab just doesn't offer anything for Angels that Celestials don't give it. So I just don't think Gab offers enough, and the fact that but the fact that this card you can still play for what's their name again? The 4 rafts. The heal stride is still very good. So I do think this deck belongs somewhere here. Probably better than Silverthorns, to be honest. So I'll put it here for now. Asha, I think I will bump this down to B tier. I think like this deck is still fine. I don't think it's terrible or anything, but it is just a generic 4-attack deck that they can't scale over heal cards and does draw a bunch, but it is blind draw, so that's kind of whatever. You don't have any ability to recycle triggers unless you're playing Legions for whatever reason, so I think this deck it's a bare bones playable deck. Not amazing, not terrible. I think it's just kind of there. You don't see it like ever, just because it's very expensive to build. So for one reason, it's too expensive. It's super expensive to build, and for two, the payoff just isn't there. So yeah, I do think it belongs in B tier. Next up, we have Mega Colony. I think this deck probably belongs in B tier as well. Probably worse than Asha. This deck it's very polarizing. You either Mega Colony either dicks on a deck or they get dicked on. Again, a single resist can screw over your entire their main stride, so that's pretty bad. You have basically no kill pressure because you do not have any ways to actually get more than 3 attacks or to deal with intercepts. So that's pretty bad. But being able to stun rears and stun Vanguard is very nice in certain matchups. This deck absolutely destroys Aquaforce, so I think that in itself warrants it being on the list. So yeah. I think this deck is fine. It's a very polarizing deck. One deck I actually forgot to mention that took off was the Nubatama. I think I rated it in Beacher last month. I just took it off because I didn't think it was worth mentioning anymore. So yeah, that's off the list, I guess. So yeah, I guess there would be a deck here. It would be Nubatama. Just put that on the off the list here. Next off, Thavas. I don't think anything makes this deck worse. So I think this deck still belongs in S tier. Got some support as well. Commander Thavas is a pretty good option to go into. It lets you attack from back row, which is cool. To get your 4 attack, even if you're missing like an enabler. But for the most part, the people I usually see, using this, they usually just go for this just to give power to a rear, so I can spring over stuff, which is like cool, I guess. So yeah, has got some new support. Adeline's an okay card too, I think. Probably the Glimmer Clone for Thavas. That card's probably okay. But overall, the deck is still. Thavas does Thavas things. Lambros is still good. Commander Thavas is a cool addition. The deck is basically still the same. Got a few new toys to play with, but that's basically it. Still a very good deck. Still rolls you over going second. Still has one of the highest kill ceilings in the game, and that's why I think it belongs up here. And finally, for next up for Bermuda, I just took away every non-duo deck, and I just put Roan here to represent every Bermuda deck that's not duos. That's why you don't see Mirror Loris. I think because there's been like an advent of another new build that people start playing ever since CS that popularized it, the Mir Victoria list, and I just did not see a reason to put like Mir Victoria, Mir, and Loris all on the list when those 3 decks are all more or less the same. The only good Bermuda deck that I think is different is duos, because that deck is fundamentally different just because of the choice restrictions. I still think duos are the best deck. Big surprise, right? Big surprise. And I do think all those Bermuda decks are probably like top of A, like bottom of S. I'll just leave it here for now, but I'll probably leave this here at like the top of A tier for all other Bermuda decks. These are all very, very, very solid decks. They all have a very cohesive game plan. The Bermuda G Zone is very powerful. I am of the opinion that as long as you own like 4 Olivias, you throw in some Spikas in the deck, any Bermuda deck is probably playable. Even some like Tragic Riviere. That deck is probably more playable than like some of the stuff under it, just because like of how powerful the Bermuda G Zone is, how powerful Spica is as an extender, and the fact that you can just jam resist in the deck in matchups that are needed. I do think that as long as your G Zone is complete for Bermuda, it's probably a fine deck. So in case you missed it, Roan just represents all the non-dual Bermuda decks that are good. So like Mir Victoria, Mir, and Loris. So that's what the Roan represents. And duos, I don't think I need to say much about duos. Duos. They are a very degenerate deck. They drag on games forever. They are good on release. They got choice restricted, and it's still good. So, good deck. I still think the best deck until they do something about it. I don't see this deck dropping down from S tier at all whatsoever. I still think, even unless they actually do something, I think this deck will probably just hover in S tier until Power Creep just creeps it out. But until then, I think it's still the best deck. Next up, we have Mr. Chronojet. I actually have a very low opinion of this deck right now. I think this deck just doesn't do much of anything. I actually think this deck is like low A. Actually, this is the lower end of A tier now. My issue with Chronojet, come with discussion with some of the people I talked to. I think the best way to put it is that the deck has a very good kill turn with next stage, but the process of getting them to 5 is just not good. Like Gears don't have like a good game plan from pushing them from like 3 to 5, especially if they heal down. So that little like void in there where you're playing like where they're not at 5 is just really awkward for the deck. So I think that's why it goes there. It does speak volumes that this deck's best grade 2 is probably Ishin, and that's basically a vanilla 9k resist. So kind of goes to show how bad this deck is, how like unimpressive this deck is. I think this is still a fine deck overall. I think Fate Rider is still a really good stride. Next stage is still a great finisher. But that little like point of in between the game, you just don't have like a good efficient way to push damage while also maintaining hand size. So it just feels very iffy. Still a fine deck. I just think it's not as good as people say it is. And the rep rate does show in the CS. I think like 1 person or 2 people have it in their top 16 list, and in one of their 3 decks in top 16. So it kind of goes to show that gears are not amazing. Link Joker or Messiahs. Also, I think my pins at this has dropped a little bit, but I do think it's still like better than Gears for sure. I think also 2 people brought it to top 16, but I think my biggest issue with Messiah right now is that with the introduction of Hari and Granblue, they both have ways to just empty off their board, to just clear everything off the board, meaning you have nothing to lock, so that screws over Big Crunch. Screws over your lock counts for something like Amnesty or Exelix, so that's definitely annoying. And yeah, I think that's still pretty solid overall. When you hit your trigger, draw your pieces, it's a very good deck, but the fact that the meta has a bunch of cards, has decks that let you let them just get their own cards off the board does hinder its matchups against the other decks slightly, so yeah. Next up, we have Metalborgs. I think this deck does belong down Beecher now. Probably better than, but overall more solid than Bugs, so probably around here. It's solid deck. It does Borgs do Borgs things. It glory checks you. That's basically all it does. But it's solid enough of a game plan that it's a solid deck overall. That I'm willing to put it on the list. Beat you for now. Maybe it comes off the month. Maybe it comes off the list next month. But yeah, I think it's still overall a relatively solid deck. Next up, we have Vanquisher. I think Vanquisher does belong a little higher just because of the meta that we are in right now. I think it's actually slightly better than Messiah. I think Messiah overall is a more solid deck, but I do think that in the current meta, Vanquisher does have its niche in that it picks it. The binding does actually matter right now because Angels are a very popular deck, and that is a Legion deck, or Celestials at least. So binding their PGs, binding their heals is very nice. Granblue is also a very prominent meta threat, as you'll see later. Where do I put it? Very popular as well, and Vanquisher, obviously in the binder drop zone, to take away all their key pieces needed for their plays is very good. So I don't think Vanquisher is particularly better than these decks, but just in the meta that we're in right now, I think Vanquisher serves a like a role as an anti-meta kind of deck, right? Like overall, it's still a relatively solid deck, but I do think that they are just to keep some of the other better decks in check. Still dies to duels because of anti-hero, just because of resist, or dies to Bermuda because of resist. Actually, duels better than other Bermuda just because duels are still Legion centric. You still bind all the pieces, so there's that. But it dies to all the other Bermuda decks. So I'll leave it slightly higher than these just right now, just because of its role in the meta right now. Brawlers. I think Brawlers are probably like somewhere in A tier, probably bottom of A tier. Brawlers do Brawlers things. They're still in Narukami clan, so they still have access to the bind. They punch stuff. They punch the board. Pretty cool, right? So deck basically is just kind of there. It's not terrible, not amazing. In tournaments where you're allowed to quote-unquote side deck, Brawlers are a very nice addition to Vanquisher because the decks that Vanquisher struggles against are the resist decks, and Brawlers don't care about that. So I think it's pretty cool. So I do think it belongs here just for that reason. But overall, I do think it is not as good as Vanquisher or any of these other decks. I think it's here. I think it's good enough to belong here, but I just don't think it's good enough to be any higher than this. Next up, Blademaster and Overlord. I put somewhere here probably. With every month, you just go lower and lower. Overlord is Overlord. It's not much to talk about. It's still like a serviceable deck. Blademaster is, well, Blademaster retires a bunch of stuff, but right now I think it's worse than Vanquisher just because of the fact that you don't bind with this deck and the fact that all your scalers actually require you to retire, and against stuff like Night Rose or Hari. Hari a little less so just because it doesn't show up as often, but just in those matchups, you have nothing to retire because they can just kill off their own board, meaning you can't scale against them, so that kind of suck. So yeah, decks that can... Night Rose being very popular and being able to kill off their own board means your deck loses its gimmick, making it noticeably not as good just because of that. But it's still a very all-around solid deck. Kagero is Kagero. Kagero does Kagero things, so yeah, it does. I do think it belongs somewhere in A tier, so it's better than all these decks. So yeah. Next up, we have I'll talk about Celestials after actually. We have Revengers. Revengers just a very well-rounded deck. Probably go somewhere here. It's just a very well-rounded deck. Solid G-Zone, solid options overall. Has Legion. Not much else to say about this deck. It's a very overall well-rounded solid deck. Yeah, I don't think there's much to say about it. It's just a very well-rounded solid deck. Altmile. This deck you don't see at all just because it's again very. It's in a similar position as Asho, where it's very expensive to build, and the payoff just isn't there for how expensive it is. I actually probably think this deck is probably closer to the bottom, near the bottom of B. I actually think it's better than all these decks actually. probably somewhere, probably like in like the lower mid-rangey-ish area of A tier, I think. I think it's better than Asha for sure. I think looking at it now, I think it's also probably better than these decks. Actually, Gears probably belong a little higher. I think Gears probably belong like somewhere here. Yeah. So something like this. Alt Mile, it's a very well-rounded deck. It does very simple things. Calls grade 2s, hits face, scales really big. Nothing special about it. It just does good things in this game. It calls grade 2s. Grade 2s are intercepts. It hits big numbers to ignore heal guards. It does cool multi-attacks. Has options to retire. Very well-rounded deck. Very solid deck. Nothing else to say about it. It's just a all-around good deck. Next up, we have the two Celestials. I actually could put this list at the bottom A tier. I actually don't think Celestials are S tier. I think, I just don't think the deck belongs in S. I think there is an argument to put at the end of S, but I do think this deck's really good. I do see why why it was like I think the most represented deck in top 16 in CS in the Winter CS, but I'm not of the opinion that this deck is as good as the decks that I think are in S tier. I think this deck has a pretty okay kill turn at 5. You can loop Haruts. You can go Harut into Harut into Harut or into a solo attacker in that last attack. So that is three checks to face and points at 5. Raph herself is just a really good card. Best way to put it, in this game right now, if you're at 5, you're very dead. If you're at 4, you're probably alive. Raph will let you heal down from 5 to 4 to avoid just dying on the next turn. It's very good. Being the snowball advantage from healing from like 4 to 3 just lets you basically live for sure, lets you snowball the damage lead a lot. So I think Raph is a very good card. Legion is very good, lets you recycle all your triggers, your pieces. So overall, we're a very solid deck, but I do think this deck is lacking a little bit in the kill pressure department. Like Harut is good and all, don't get me wrong, but I do think this deck is not nearly as it's not as scary as some of the other really good decks are when they're at 5. So because a lot of these other decks, they can also like duos can play a grind game, but their kill turn is also scary because they have access to Spica and Olivia, which I think is just overall more scary than anything Angels can do. Lambros or Thavas doesn't kill you, doesn't live as long as you, but they kill you a lot faster, which I do think is better. And Night Rose, which I do actually think is an S tier, we'll go over that after, has I think an even higher kill ceiling than Thavas, and has a very good like early push game as well. So I really think Angels just kind of lacking. Angels also really do not want to get rushed because they want the game to just go at a very slow pace. Raph isn't an option until GB2 as well, so if they go first, they are like playing behind from their little like stall game. So overall, I think it's still a very good deck. Don't get me wrong, I think this deck is still very powerful, but I don't think it belongs in the S tier with these two decks. And speaking of S tier, Night Rose, I do think it belongs in S. I think it's the worst of the 3 decks though, but I do think it belongs up here. Like I said earlier, very good early game because this deck just generates enough advantage to just let you push early. They can push for early damage, making their Night Rose turn on their second stride much better because usually your first stride is the Obaida, and that card doesn't push damage at all. You have to use other cards that will help you push damage, help you push. So I do think that having a really good early game, just doing slam cards down early if you just want to, is very nice. Grench is a very stupid card, the countercharging starter, very good card. You have some obnoxious matchups in Vanquisher, mainly Vanquisher, just because they bind all your stuff, but I do think Obaida is good enough of a card, letting you just dump the pieces you want immediately into drop zone. Covers enough of that, and yeah, just a very overall solid deck, and the Captain Naruto's kill turns are absolutely disgusting, because Grench just lets you have basically like 5 open on kill turn. You basically just get to use like all your skills and just go in face. You get like this deck, I think actually on optimal setups have like a stronger kill turn than Lambros. Lambros is what, 4 checks? I think this thing can get like 5 or 6 checks on its kill turn, which is a really powerful. So strong early game, pluses enough, and a very threatening kill turn. Definitely puts it up here. The reason I think Thavas is just a little bit better just because this deck like draws more cards to hand, meaning they draw more cards. So like, although the kill turn is slightly less threatening, still very threatening, obviously. But I think this ability to just draw more cards, draw more guards is better because Night Rose is one of those decks that sometimes just ends up with like fake ass hands with like 1 guard in hand with like a 6-7 card hand, which does happen quite often, so I do think that reason, this deck having fake hands does put it under something like a Babas or Labros, so yeah. And finally, Hari, I actually don't know where to put this deck. You never see this deck on ladder because it's just people just don't play it. I don't own the pieces needed to try the deck out myself, but in theory, this deck is probably somewhere in A tier. Where, I have no idea, but it's probably somewhere in like this area, probably. This is a deck that like I just don't see very often, like at all. I can't try it myself, so this is all going off of theory. In theory, this deck is probably good because you have like really good kill turns as well. Hari Stride is very good. You get really big numbers, so you can hit over heal cards, and when you actually push, you can actually hit over defensive stuff, so that's pretty nice. Obviously, there's the main issue of sometimes you just can't leave intercepts in the front row just because of the fact that your cards all go back against the Magia, but you do have ways to keep stuff in the front when you need them. Stuff like Trapezis lets you do that, so which is pretty nice. And overall, this deck is probably fine. It's probably somewhere here. I'll definitely have a more informed opinion of it once I finish the deck myself, but for now, I'll just leave it somewhere in A tier. Probably somewhere smack dab in the middle. I'll just leave it with Silver Thorns just because it's probably somewhere in this area. But I'll just leave it under it, I guess, just because people brought Silver Thorns and didn't bring Hari, so I'm assuming people think it's better than it, so I'll just leave it like that for now. But yeah. This is this month's tier list. Let me know what you think about it down below in the comments. I am open to suggestions if I forgot something. There's always some deck I probably forgot about that people always ask me, hey, where's this, but for the most part, if I forgot, I'll tell you, I'll give you an opinion of it. If it's if I don't think it's good enough, there's a reason why it's not on here, so yeah. So tell me all about that stuff down below in the comments, and I will see you guys next time. Peace out.